Thank you so much for joining us today. Very, very grateful to be a part of the Cannabis Sustainability Symposium this year. And this is the 6th year of the symposium. And here we are among the leading voices in the world to talk about these very important things that affect not only the cannabis industry, but the larger world around us. My name is Leah Maurer. I am a cannabis activist based here in Portland, Oregon, and I am one of the owners and the editorial lead for the weedblog.com, which is a cannabis news and information site. I also do a fair amount of social equity work. I serve on the advisory council for Marijuana Matters, which is a social equity nonprofit based in Washington, D.C., and in a few other advisory roles in different nonprofits in other places in the country. Being a Midwest native, I did move out to the West Coast because of the friendlier cannabis laws after a firsthand experience with the drug war in Missouri in 2009, and have just been kind of plugging along this path since then. And I am thrilled to be moderating such an amazing panel here today to talk about the importance of women in cannabis. So rather than reading the bios of these amazing people that we have today, I am going to let them introduce themselves. So I would like to welcome both Sherry Franklin of the Urban Design Center and Jessica Steinberg of the Global C and Entourage Network to the stage at this time. Hello, 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 ladies. Thank you so much for joining today. I'm so excited for this discussion. And I'm going to try to talk as little as possible and let you all share your insight and experience and knowledge with the attendees today, because you ladies have just done an incredible amount of work. Your bios are so impressive, but I really want to give you the opportunity to introduce yourselves rather than me doing it. So Sherry, let's start with you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the opportunity to share with you today. My name is Sherry Franklin with Urban Design Center. We are an organization that works with government agencies, nonprofits, and private developers to reimagine our communities and focus on community and economic development and entrepreneurship. In that role, during the legalization process, we were asked to help with the social equity program to create an incubator. We did that through our Think and Grow Lab organization. We created an incubator for cannabis companies and ventures that are social equity. We helped create Go Verde Incubator, which is approximately 100,000 square feet of cannabis now licensed operators with cannabis flower, manufacturing, and distro. We then went on to help other organizations create incubators, Green Believers, and a few others. And now we have the Ujima Tribe Incubator that's working to develop brands in this marketplace as well. We are licensed in West Hollywood. We have a license with my partner, Danny Shaker, for Cannabis Consumption Lounge and for both edibles and smoke. And we have a training program online in our resiliency studio to help business ventures get into the market, understand it. We always say that it's 99% non-cannabis. We're doing this in Los Angeles, we're doing it in Sacramento, we're doing it in Detroit, and helping people with the real estate aspect, as well as licensing and raising capital.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing. And I so look forward to hearing what you have to say to the attendees that are here for this panel. Jessica, welcome. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you. So nice to be here with both of you. My name is Jessica Steinberg. So I'm currently based in Oxford in England as I am finishing up my PhD. And I will be, from what I understand, the first graduate of the university to be studying the legal cannabis market, which is quite exciting.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So my research dates back around 5 years. I'm an anthropologist and I study more or less are you also an anthropologist, Sherry? Here we go. I love this. I'm studying the transformation of the cannabis movement and the market and the interconnectivity of the two, how in order to understand one, you have to look at the other, vice versa, the process of commodification and really just understanding what's happening from an inside out version of this. So that is the academic side, which led into two other ventures one of which is Entourage Network, which is a women's empowerment platform based here in the UK. And we focus on empowering, exploring, and engaging women in the legal cannabis market in Europe specifically, which at the time when we started in 2018 was very specific and still is quite specific to the context of the European market, which is so dissimilar to the North American market. So we really contextualize that to the women here and the challenges and the opportunities that are present. And then the third thing that I do that came out of the PhD as well is a international cannabis consultancy called the Global C. So we really bridge connections between North America and America, working with our clients to strategize on market entry, business development, building out networks and things like that. So that is a bit of what I do, and I'm just so excited to get into the conversation with you guys.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much. Wow, you two bring such an amazing amount of knowledge and experience to the table. I feel like this panel could probably run 3 hours just by hearing all the things you guys have done. I'm so excited to just get into this and talk with you ladies. So we are here today specifically to discuss the importance of women leadership in cannabis. And obviously with this being the Sustainability Symposium, we also want to make sure we're touching on sustainability. And with your all's background, I'm sure that is going to be something that will weave in and out of the conversation here. I'm going to kind of go with the descriptor of the panel. That tells people that a fair and often repeated critique since the early days of the cannabis industry has been the dominance of men, white men in particular, in high profile and leadership positions. There has been a growing change in the tide, however, as the focus on equity has grown, so has the prominence of women-led businesses and organizations. And we're going to go ahead and kind of start with that. And let's actually go with you first, Jessica. I know it's very late there, and we really appreciate you being with us. Well, I guess it's night for you, but afternoon for me here on the West Coast. And Sherry, I would like for you to answer this as well. We'll just start with Jessica. Do you think things have changed in the cannabis industry in terms of diversity since you started, and why or why not? And let's go ahead and add on, like, what sort of trend do you see, or what sort of work do you see needing to be done when we talk about, equity, inclusion, and diversity in the cannabis space?
Yeah, I think this is a loaded question.
It definitely is. Take your time in answering, because there's just 2 of you instead of 3. So let's do it.
Yeah. It's interesting because this is a question that I'm asking more generally in my thesis. So I've been studying this, that how has the cannabis market in general changed, or is it just a replication of systems and structures that have existed since the 20th century, for example? Just, are we replicating a new business? Is it new at all? Do we really have this opportunity to make an impact on the environment? And if we do, how are we doing it differently? So from a gender perspective, my humble opinion is no, it has not changed that much. I think since I started, I can give the European context, and then Sherry can probably help on the North American one. But when I started going to conferences, for example, in the UK and around Europe, I was one of 2 women in the room. Now I'm probably one of 20 at a good conference prior to COVID. So I don't think that's a huge difference. A dramatic difference to me would be 40-60%, or even 30-70 I'd be happy with. But right now what I do see is that women, again, in European context, most women that I see are in entry-level positions rather than executive level. And that's something that is disappointing, because it's like, how much do you value women? Or how much are you valuing the diversity of your leadership team in order to prioritize this or that? I can say at our Entourage events, it's 90% women and 10% men. And in part, that is related to a sense of confidence, related to a sense of comfortability and familiarity. Again, there's still a lot of stigma around cannabis in general, and just like lack of understanding. So I think that contributes to it. But I think overall, the simple answer would be it's still male dominated. And I still think that it's a white man's business to an extent. One of my professors, who is an examiner of mine, he actually brought to attention, he studies heroin use and ketamine use. And he was saying how heroin, for example, is not a cool drug to use, but cannabis is very cool. And there's always been this like part of the counterculture, the subculture that brings it into that light. And now the people from the counterculture have transformed in a way into the legal market, and there's still this element of coolness. And it just seems like, again, there's that replication of people who were part of the stereotypical cannabis culture. And now it's a different way that they dress and different way that they speak, but it's, again, some of the same people. So I hesitate to say that it has dramatically changed.
Thank you for your insight. And I don't think either Sherry or I would fully disagree with any of that. And I can't wait to hear what Sherry has to say. And I'll just kind of add in there that, like, not just with the involvement of women, but the involvement, you know, this idea of like diversity overall in companies and things like that. And sort of to, you know, piggyback on what you said there about, you know, it being white men dominated, especially as we're seeing in the US here with these new states popping up with legalization that are creating this open market so any investment can come in. And that's the kind of investment that we are seeing. And even with some of the cities here, like, you know, Los Angeles and Chicago and, you know, other places that have tried, you know, very hard to implement social equity programs, they have, you know, people have found gray areas, people have found loopholes where like the equity program hasn't actually played out in the way that it was intended to. And I'm up here in Portland, Oregon, like I said, and I'm actually one of the founding members for the Equity Empowerment or Equity Investment Act PAC here. We're actively lobbying for House Bill 3112 here in the Oregon State Legislature. And this, to my knowledge, is the very first bill that's circulated any state legislature that has used actual racially specific language in the bill to ensure that the people that are invested, the communities really that are invested in, as well as the individuals that will be invested in with the equity recipient program that this would create, are Black, Indigenous, and Latinx, and are, you know, have had a cannabis conviction on their record. And those are the people that we're looking at. But it's the first legislation of its kind where we've used racially specific language, which puts us in a tough place when we understand that, and we know we will have pushback from that. But it's just so important right now when we talk about that, and we talk about the inclusion of women, we talk about, you know, just bringing that piece of diversity so that we see a room with like 30-70 or hopefully 40-60 kind of split when we look at individuals. So go ahead, Sherry. I would love to hear what you have to say about this.
Thank you. So I was just thinking as you both were talking about the entree for women in this field. So we came from a legacy market where it's a lot of camaraderie around growing, you know, and those are typically men in the field. But now that we have legalization, it's opened up a lot more critical positions that women play a extreme role in right now, particularly in governance. We see a lot of the leads of these departments, our state department here in California, our city regulations departments here, Oakland, are led by women who are making decisions and driving processes. Also, I see more women entering into the testing field and the analytics field, technology, also legal. I think the initial people who were involved were men from the legal side of things, but I think more women are entering the market because it's illegal now from the legal perspective. The other field I think is in the consumption area with you know, creating products, and more women are entering from that perspective, not from the plant in terms of flower or the other things that people were experiencing with flower, the dabs and all those things, but actually culinary experiences. More and more women are entering there. For myself, I have, you know, women play a unique role in most things. We bring a different level of compassion. We bring a different level of ability to multitask. I'm going to put that up at the top. Because this field requires that people work on many different cylinders at the same time. And one of the things that we did in working with a lot of our social equity applicants is we actually had to literally marry them with a female or a woman or someone who can help them with the paperwork, who can fill it out, who can, you know, well, not fax, but some of the agencies did have fax, who can send it, scan it. That was a necessary role, because many people who are in the legacy markets are not familiar with technologies or administrative duties. So that has opened up another arm for women to be the lead in helping to manage, especially with our track and trace systems and things like that. I'm finding that people are very comfortable. Almost all the businesses that we have, there is a woman in the role of management and overseeing and making sure that they're meeting compliance. And that's what we're encouraging people to do. It's an entree. The real estate side as well. Some of the last few properties that I've taken a look at, there are women in that role. It's another role in terms of an entree, and not necessarily from the legacy. These are people coming in from other ancillary industries that are needed to make this cannabis thrive. And the last role I think that's really interesting is in just creating brands themselves. There's a formulation side, there's the culinary side, but and actually that's the growth market. I really believe that products for women is a growth market here. And the more women that we have who understand what women want, how they want it, when they want it, is a very powerful role that more women can play. And I see them stepping up every single day, which is very empowering. And for myself, the other thing is, I think from the public policy perspective, women has just really been able to redirect, how the cities have looked at policy across the board, not just for social equity, but where we probably are at disadvantage has been, I think, in the grow sector. So the more we learn about growing cannabis, the flower, and the other is on financing. A lot of people have come into the market. The new people in the market are coming from established financial management, financial institutions with the big money. That tends to be male-dominated white. So we're at a disadvantage because those are the entities crafting the ownership structures. Those are the entities crafting who's going to buy who or what, or give money to who or what. So I'd love to see more women move into that era. And then I think it would be very balanced, but it is evening out in terms of overall, but there's some areas that we can move into more rapidly.
Can I jump in quickly? And
please go ahead. Yeah.
So I think it's interesting about the cultivation or the grow side that women, I assume the assumption is that you're talking about North America. Some of my field work took place in Colombia, and it was almost the opposite, actually. Mm-hmm. The women are the ones who are leading the cultivation, and they're the ones that know how to trim and harvest and deal with the plants better than men do. Because the men, at least in Colombia, from what I understand, they were dealing with guerrilla warfare and other things about war on drugs, and the women were the ones tending to the plants. So it's really fascinating that when foreigners are interested in a place like Colombia, it's almost a shift now of who's growing, how they're growing, and things like that. So that was one point I wanted to add. And the second point is I just want to build and emphasize in the policy side that you said women really do have a voice and a strength. I think that's part of the reason that policy has shifted in the way that it has, because we look at the way like mothers with children and just like touching into the empathy of the plant and people's hearts. And when we talk about social justice or human rights, we're really talking about some like feminine characteristics. And I think women have really driven that discussion. And I don't know, honestly, if we would be where we are today if it weren't for stories like that, or for the voice of women, whether it's from the patient side or just from like the feminine characteristics that cannabis might have as a plant that we talk about oftentimes metaphorically, or just like the feminine characteristics that women often talk about in our gendered ways. So I just wanted to add those 2 points.
Absolutely.
Really highlighted it.
I love the cultural anthropologist in you. I can hear that clearly. Really looking at economic systems and how they function in other places, and then how we would have to shift our approach and empower women, which may be different for the people who are going there. So maybe that's another place, maybe through NGOs or others, that women from the US should go and help make sure that that dynamic doesn't change, because that would be a travesty. And I want to say the other thing about women in this field, with so many men having gone to jail, and particularly in Black and Latino communities, the women who had to hold things down. And they may have been brought into this field more than they ever wanted to be, because they were helping to defend or research the laws to help get the people out of jail. So they've been here holding down, and they had a familiarity from a a management and a policy perspective, because they were the fighters on the outside. And now we see them come stepping up. So I always remind people who say, well, I spent time in prison. Well, so did your mate, so did your sister, so did your mother, trying to be there to help and support you and your family while you're away. So we have to give them props as well. We were all, that's the problem with the war on drugs. We were all in our communities impacted in some way.
Absolutely. And that's such a good point to bring up. It's something that I talk about quite a bit, actually. Both of the things that you ladies said, like Jessica, what you said about, women and my opinion is like women and mothers especially have like one of the most collectively powerful and potentially pivotal voices in this whole movement, not just with cannabis prohibition, but with overall drug law reform and other social justice issues, that we are having here. I truly believe that. In 2013, I helped co-found New Approach Oregon, which is what Measure 91 was drafted and run out of, and that's what successfully legalized cannabis here in Oregon in 2014. And during that time, I founded a group through grassroots efforts alone called Moms for Yes on Measure 91. And it was just incredible to see these moms, parents, but it was mostly mothers come kind of out of the woodwork and be like, yes, I support this, and this is why. And after the campaign was over and the vote had gone and it had passed and everything, I had the campaign manager, politicians, other nonprofits, everyone come up to me and be like, those press conferences that you did as a spokesperson, as a mom, were one of the most pivotal points in this campaign when we were looking at polling and actually changing public opinion, because it's just, it's not what you would expect. And it's kind of a different angle than what a lot of people are seeing, especially those that are maybe more reserved and conservative thinkers, So I think that's a huge thing. And then, what you said, Sherry, about the whole equity piece and these communities that have just been devastated for decades because of the racist, because of the racist targeting of cannabis prohibition and the criminalization of cannabis and the overall drug war. It's not just the person that's serving time, it's everyone that's in that person's community or family that's holding it down, whether it be, housing, work, children, whatever it is, simply emotional support, all of those things, and someone else is having that experience. Our run-in with the law in 2009 in Missouri, I was not charged, but my partner is still a felon because of it. And I'm absolutely certain to this day that if he hadn't been white and we didn't have a good lawyer, he would have absolutely gone to prison. And I'm very, very comfortable talking about our privilege in that respect. But just being, having this sort of small walk in my own shoes of being married to a felon this whole time and him not being able to get gainful employment in some ways and all of those things. And it would just be compounded in so many ways. Had we not had, some generational wealth, we had help from family, we had resources that we could access. And many people do not have those. And it was a huge eye-opener for me as to, all of those, civil rights and all of the social injustices that are really intertwined in this overall picture of the drug war. And so that's kind of been a lot of what's motivated me to go on, like Jessica said, and like have the desire to change policy and have the desire to say, you know what, I'm really unhappy with the law enforcement, but actually what they're doing is just enforcing the laws here. And so the laws are where we need to start with change. And that starts with a lot of discussions at your book clubs or, play groups or whatever it is when you're talking with other women and other mothers. So and another thing, I just had a statistic. I was doing some writing the other day, actually, and one of the facts that I came across, because I was looking about, women in the consumer market, and women drive actually 70 to 80% of all consumer purchasing decisions in total. That's huge. So when you talk about like women being involved in this industry and having a voice and being able to, help the platforms they're a part of, the companies they're a part of, this is a huge piece, because in fact, that is a huge demographic that these companies should all be thinking about marketing to, right? So that's another big, point to put on. Okay, let's kind of move on. I know we kind of like—
I can comment quickly on that. Just, so my family lives in Colorado, so when I'm not in the UK, I'm over there, and I just think the consumer experience is not tailored for a woman's shopping preferences or habits. And it just goes to show that when, like Sherry was talking about the opportunity for women to get into brand development or product development and things like that. And I just think in terms of when we do look at leadership teams or just company breakdowns and social hierarchies and things like that, where women need to be placed need to be consider it on the consumer end, because if a company ends up making a product, let's call it women's sexual health, and it's a team of men making it, it's never going to work because you don't know the body. Like, I've had how many years experiencing a female body that they will never have in the same way. They will have some experience, but it's not the same. So it's just, there needs to be an element of prioritizing a woman's voice at the table. And I think, again, that extends over to the idea of diversity as well, that it's not just about gender, but it's about representing whoever you're targeting in terms of your demographic for your consumers. And so whether it's the consumer shopping experience or the product user or the consumer user experience itself, it seems like a lot of times these, at least companies in the UK, are quite distant from the consumers that they're selling to. And that's really problematic, in my opinion.
Absolutely. And like, I want to, that kind of is like a perfect segue into the next topic I kind of wanted to touch on. So if you want to expand, Jessica, and I mean, you kind of already hit on it, but if there's more you want to expand on, then we can go to Sherry. But the next question that I had for you guys is, why should cannabis companies make an effort to increase diversity in their stakeholders, leadership, and employees? This is kind of what you were already talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I'll elaborate a bit further, that I just think nowadays it goes two ways. It's like, if you are a company that is leaving a bad impact on the environment, you're not going to be selling it well. If you're a company that doesn't take into consideration your demographic, you're not going to sell well. I think there are expectations from a consumer end that we should be sustainable, that we should not be polluting the environment. And maybe this is my age range, and if a company is targeting my generation, then that should be a factor. But more so, I think that it's becoming a mainstream norm that these are the expectations. And I think it just reflects poorly on a company in general if they're so excited about the past and the systems that ruled the past and are just ignoring what the present requires. And I think that is how a business does grow and becomes more successful, because when we bring diversity and representation to the table, we're looking at diversifying products and bringing representation in your products, and it all translates. So if you have the people there, that's exactly what you're going to be providing. So I think it should be a baseline requirement.
Absolutely. Yeah, go ahead.
I agree 100%. And, you know, one of the things I've noticed, and I've had a chance to meet and greet with a lot of leadership, we still have a lot of fraternal type of relationships in the formation of these companies happening, people coming together around their previous legacy experience, and really a lot of nostalgia around the way it used to be and what happened back in the past. And I think it behoove companies to kind of put that away in their memory and let that go a little bit and think about what will make them successful today. That was in the legacy market. And the more they understand that, the more successful they will be, as you know, particularly understanding who is the new market. It's women, and not only in the decision-making process, but in the growth of the industry. It's also about making sure that you have products that are not just about, you know, the legacy and, you know, enjoyment of the product, but the medicinal elements and the beauty, you know, as you mentioned. So these are areas that I think companies should look into and think about their culture. Their culture internally is something that I hear a lot of pushback from women in terms of how they were treated. There were no labor laws in the legacy market. There were no, you know, sexual harassment laws in the labor market and the legacy market. So they've really got to take a look at that, because they're also in a different market now. You cannot have, not that it was ever a good thing, but you really cannot do that now, because you can jeopardize the ability of your company to continue to be licensed. So those are things from a legal perspective, I think, that they need to take a look at. Also, this is a fast-paced industry. Things are changing. There's laws, there's rules. I think a lot of people want to still have that camaraderie in who they have, but you're limiting your capacity for growth if you don't bring on the best person for those jobs. And they're not always men. You know, there are lots of women who would serve well in those positions. So I think bifurcating your idea of what a company looks like keeping the company about business, growth, development, the best team possible, and take your social life to the basketball court, your social clubs, and all those other places so that you can make the best hiring decisions for a company and be something that people can also inform their decision. I know I look at who's in this company when I make a decision. And if I see something that's all men, I'm kind of inclined not to support that company. And women have the ability to make that decision now. So it's a good advice for them.
Absolutely. And these are the kind of things that we see consumers in general, maybe, women, especially since, often women are the people who are making the purchasing decisions for their households and things like that. We're already seeing these kinds of trends in consumer habits when you're talking about, more simple things like clothing purchases or grocery purchases, like people, or brands as they're going into the grocery store, like they want this brand of chips or this brand of bread because they like the story behind it. They like what the company stands for. They know the company has community involvement or sustainable practices or whatever their priorities are, and it's the same thing with like people that are running through it. One of the points that I've taken away just from my colleagues here, that are working in the space about diversity in employment and diversity in leadership positions is that if you don't have women in your leadership, if you don't have, people of color in your leadership, if you don't have people that operated in the legacy market in your leadership, you are missing out on marketing to all of those demographics. So not only is it like the ethically, morally right thing to do, but it can actually help your company grow and be more successful. I feel really fortunate here in Portland, Oregon, that we have Deshita Dawson overseeing our cannabis program here in the city. And her and her sisters put together an excellent event I got to attend about 3 weeks ago that was actually called Legacy to Legal. And the entire event was about, and it was pretty specific to New York because of their big news and the New Jersey area around New York. But it was about supporting legacy operators into the legalized market. And like, yes, you have this legacy experience and that is absolutely valuable. That sets you aside in a way that like no one can go to school for that. No one can gain that experience in 2 months of time. Like you have this experience. Yes, it's very valuable, but you also must make sure that you have these other things in place. As Sherry was just saying, like all of those things are just as important once you become a legalized operator, and that the support that we need to offer these legacy operators as they bridge into the legalized market is absolutely crucial as we build out this legalized industry. And like Jessica was saying about this being like a standard, and like one of the things that is still one of my biggest hopes for the cannabis industry overall is that we can have these industry standards in place, diversity, sustainability, ethics, morality, all of those things, and not only have an awesome standard across our industry, but have other industries actually look at the cannabis industry and say, wow, they're really raising the bar. Maybe we should too. Like that would be one of my biggest hopes, because I know in my lifetime, I'm never going to see another emerging industry. I don't know if my children will see one in their lifetime either. So this is a huge opportunity for us to like right some of those wrongs. Okay, so now we've talked about like why it's important, why we need it. Now I want to talk about what are some ways that cannabis companies can increase both women in leadership positions at their companies and company diversity overall? What would your advice be to someone who says, okay, right, I hear all this, but guess what? My entire team is white men. What do I do? How is the best way for me to go about this and to go about it so that I'm also going to be getting, solid employees, solid people in leadership? What do I do?
That's something we've been thinking a lot about at the Think and Grow Lab. And as part of it, we created we have an opportunity center that we've created on our Resiliency Studio platform at Urban Design Center. And it is meant to help companies assess the best talent that they need in the cannabis and hemp markets, help them understand the types of outputs that they're looking for and relate that back to a job. And we can actually do blind resumes, for instance. So if you look at a resume, you don't know if that person's a woman or a man. And that is going to help people make a decision based on qualifications. So we're really excited about that. And we want to work with as many people, not only a woman, but the diversity of that person, because we want to increase the number of people who are working in communities. If you have a business in a minority community, you should not import people outside of the community to work there. We want to support local hiring and development of skill sets. The other thing is, companies we find can take a look at how do they scale people because they're scaling, and invest money into professional development, because you never know what gem you have until you give them an opportunity to shine. And if you invest time into more people, particularly women, that can help you diversify your team, because you might find that what you thought was a good skill set doesn't necessarily meet all of your needs. But the C-suite level of jobs, I think for women and for minorities, that's an effort going that we're really trying to work on here in California. I'm glad that the governor made a law so that, corporations have to do some level of diversity for their boards at their corporate level, but it shouldn't have to be that way. And I'll take it back to this fraternal element of this business. I think networking and creating more types of ways for people to meet and greet on a professional level, not on a level that many people are used to fraternizing, but we need to have more sessions where people can meet and greet, round table, and understand the capacity. The last thing is listening. The Obama, I was listening to something someone was saying about the Obama administration with the very high-powered women that he had in his cabinet. They actually had to create something called amplification. Whereas this, the ambassador would say to, the head of, the Secretary of State, I think that was a great idea you had, Jessica. That was a great idea. You did that. Well, Cherie, I think, what you said was good. And they would go around and literally have to amplify what each other said before a man actually even heard what they said. And I've rehearsed this and practiced this in many C-suite environments, and it is a travesty. So the one skill set that and men come to the table with the most jaded understanding of a capacity of women that I've ever experienced. It's just amazing to me how they don't come looking at a woman for who she is and what she can do in her skill sets. We still have that big problem in our society. So how do we elevate the woman above that thinking, that visual, and that they want to see, and really make sure that they understand who they have at the table and lift that person up so that their company can be lifted at the same time. But we want men to listen more, and I think they'll discover that they're missing out.
I mean, on that note, I think I would just add that I've seen from specifically the Entourage Network that it goes really two ways in this. So as much as people at the table, for example, need to be listening, there's an element of we need to have the confidence to be able to speak, and we need to feel comfortable enough to speak. And maybe that's what I mean. I think it goes both ways. So the comfort in an area, creating that environment to be able to do that is really important, but it's also about having the experience or enough practice or whatever it might be where someone might feel held back. So I think that's one thing that I would add to your point, Sherry. And then the other thing I think is, it's similar to what you're saying as well, is if we take a step back and kind of remove ourselves, whatever company we're in, from our assumptions of what a typical business looks like. If we're saying that cannabis can be different, then let's actually make it different. Let's go outside of our familiar comfort of our current network, take a risk in a different way. Maybe someone younger than us could actually be better at what we don't know how to do, like TikTok. You know what I mean? Like, let's bring in people who are, like you've said, like really good at what they do and add value, regardless of their background, what they look like, if they have an accent. Like, I don't really care. If they're better at it, they should be doing the job. And so it's almost like taking yourself out of the position and the relation and removing those assumptions in order to allow people to come to the table and feel comfortable and confident enough to do so. And so I think, back to my original point, that it just goes two ways in that. And the final point I'll make is Jasmine, who co-founded Entourage with me, she worked in HR for quite a while, and she always said that what she found is that for the same position, when it normally has the requirements that are listed, men are way more likely to just be super ambitious and apply for the job when they meet, I don't know, like 20 to 50% of the requirements, whereas women, when they say that, they just don't send in the application. So when she was working with a lot of people applying for jobs, she had to especially encourage the women to just throw out a CV, have a conversation, prove themselves in the interview, kind of create and establish that relationship. And so again, I think there's something about that two-way relationship. Like, let's encourage the confidence, let's build it, and let's invite each one of us to the table to listen, to have that back and forth, and in order to prioritize that for a company. And then lastly, I think if other employees know that that's the culture of the company and that's how the environment is set up, then they will encourage the people in the hiring process to do so, and they will make sure it's emphasized. And so I think it's not only from the executive people who might be bringing someone on, but it's also something on a daily basis that they need to kind of have bouncing off the walls. And it's like diversity, sustainability, whatever the values are, gender, stuff like that. I think it just needs to be always ringing in people's ears, that it shouldn't be an afterthought. It's the first thought that they have.
I agree with you 100%. And when I think about my role as a mentor, and we all are, right, and are in helping, I spend a lot of time doing just that, is just prepping someone for that interaction they're going to have, and doing role play, and helping them remember how powerful they are, remember your skill sets, remembering you can run rings around everybody in the room, you know, and own that, know that, and help them deal with it, because it is language. The strong language could be very triggering, I found, for some women, particularly if they're not in the best relationship, you know, and you go into an office and that same voice is ringing in your ear. I find that is another thing in tone and tenor of conversations that men bring to the table. Women don't bring that to the table because that's not how we show our prowessness. That's not how we show our leadership. We don't have to raise our voice to do that. So that's another thing that I think these companies need to do. And then the other thing is a lot of people who are in this field in the legacy, they were the shot callers. I mean, that's literally how they ran things. I'm the shot caller, the big baller, the shot caller. So got to change your method of management. You're no longer the shot caller. You know, you have to look at and involve people in the decision-making process.
Absolutely. And I've heard kind of what you were referring to in terms of, like, you know, confidence, whether it's, you know, applying for the job, sending out your CV, doing the interview or whatever, as imposter syndrome. Are you familiar with that, Sherry's? Yeah, and for anyone watching that doesn't know, it's basically like when you don't see yourself as what you are, and you're like, no, I couldn't do that. That's not me. But in fact, it really is you. Like, it's the imposter syndrome that's kind of creeping in on you. And we can totally understand how women would feel like this, especially if they've, you know, had trauma in their past, had bad relationships, had bad work experiences, had harassment in the workplace. And same thing. I mean, good grief, you talk about these people that are coming from communities that have literally been devastated by the criminalization of cannabis for decades. Of course, they're going to be a little bit like, okay, what is going on here? How do I enter into this? Like, Sherry, I'm sure you see that all the time, and we have a little bit of time left. And I would love if you would, you know, share any stories like that from the incubator program that you've done.
Absolutely. Again, you know, I spend a lot of my time on the coaching side of people through no matter what their knowledge base. It's all these other things that are the barriers to success. And so one of the things we've employed is, even though I've been the co-founder and creator, I don't make myself the CEO of our companies. We have a woman who we made CEO of our Go Verde incubator, Chauncey Bullock, and that helps uplift. I'm the supporter. I'm the person who helps. And then Ujima Tribe, it's Howard Harrison the third, who is our legacy owner, and he spent many years away. We call it like 18 years. And so one of the things he reminds me about, I can give you a story. We were able to get one of our brands, the Justice Tree brand, which is facilitated by Mama Clark. Her son was killed by the Sacramento police, and she wanted to do something to help raise money and awareness. And so she came to our incubator, created a brand called a Justice Tree, and the first strain is Zoblo. It's in Cookies Melrose and also available in Sacramento. But we need to do activations at the stores. And I can remember the panic in people's voices when we had to do that. So Howard, he called and he's like, what do I do? Where do I go? Do I just go talk to people? And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, it's already set up. Go talk to people. Then I had to remember, this is his first time actually walking up in a position of leadership into an all-white environment, or one that he perceived to be controlled by a big company. And so we stayed on the phone. He's outside of Cookies. And I just stayed on the phone. I said, so if this wasn't Cookies and this was something in your neighborhood, what would you do? He's like, well, I'd call my little homie and have them come and do some signatures, because we just released a little album, have them come and have, we turn it up. I said, well, then go turn it up at Cookies. And he did that. He turned it up at Cookies. He went there, he picked the bud that he thought was the most friendly. He said, can you play this record? Played the record. He has the music going. And then you can see when he left there, the level of confidence was just on 1,000% more, because he can see that being him and him for all of his experiences didn't hold him back from being successful. And our cookies sold, people were buying, it just was a great story. And I'm so proud of him. And now he's using that experience, because there's a conference in Vegas. And I said, you have to go and lead. I'm not going there with you. What would you do? And he's put it together and making it happen. And I'm just really excited about it. But we have to figure out, how do we help them see things, see themselves in a leadership role, and see themselves as being successful, because they are. And they can run this business just like anybody else who went to school or with a big company. They're the leaders.
Absolutely. And that's like kind of what we were talking about bringing your voice and your cultural experience and your legacy experience, into this regulated market, and still, utilizing it. What a fabulous story. I love that. Jessica, do you have any stories like that you would share about the women that you work with in the Entourage?
I'm trying to think of.
I know it's a different kind of, group than like the work that Sherry does with an incubator program, but like, it's just, yeah. I know people love stories like this, because it's like what keeps us going, right? Like, it worked, it's happening. Like, yes,
Yeah. I don't have like a very good story that just captures the essence of what Sherry has just shared. I mean, the things that we've experienced, I guess, like that's probably a really good example of more like a macro scale, something that you can tangibly see the difference. For us, sometimes it's like one conversation where someone says something really, I don't know, like someone would typically brush off the shoulder, like, I believe that you can do that, or I totally see where this idea could fill a gap in the market, or I've never thought about it like that, like little small comments like that. And we've had people come back to us through Entourage and say, I entered the room 2 hours before thinking one thing, and I left feeling like a superhero, or a superwoman, I should say, just because it's like the words of encouragement, or just simply saying, I believe in you, you can do this. This is an opportunity that if you want to create it, we will support you. So to contrast what Sherry said, that's just like a very micro scale example of what can be done on an everyday basis through typical conversations that happen in the ordinary. And I think oftentimes those do get forgotten. And so sometimes we need a little boost. And if someone's on your shoulder saying something like that, it can kind of turn your mentality and your perspective around about what is possible, or what you thought might be hindering your current success. So that's something that we see on a regular basis. And I think it's a nice reminder at all times.
Absolutely. And that is sort of along the same lines of what Sherry was talking about with this whole idea of amplification, of like lifting that voice up a few more times, so that, the powers that be, or whoever the shot caller is, or whatever, hears that and sees, credits that idea or that insight or whatever to the appropriate individual, or to the, the people or team that did that work. Absolutely. We have about 5 more minutes. I would love to hear any final thoughts that either of you have before we close the panel here.
Well, regarding sustainability, I think women are going to play a big role in driving sustainability, because those are things that we tend to care about in terms of product and how, you know, we dispose of it, how we're, you know, using energy, how we're managing resources. So that's another field that I think would be great for women to be in. When we were looking at the design for LED lighting for one of our grows, we wanted it to be sustainable, take a risk and see what does that mean to grow with LED lights, because nobody really knew at the time, yield and capacity and all those things. We were surprised how many women were in the field of engineering and thinking through innovation for the creation of LED lighting. So that was another thing I think women are bringing to the table when it comes to sustainability in products, not necessarily cannabis, but in related in hemp. Lots of women are in that space, looking at creating products, whether it's clothing or paper goods or other things that can be sustainable. So I think that's an area that we can work to elevate more women and pay homage to the good work that they're already doing.
Yeah, I think the final thing that I would end with is kind of the beauty of the network of women that I have been around. And I think there's something really special about the connections within this space, specifically amongst women, where it really does seem like wherever you go, maybe it's because we're one of few in the room, but it always just seems like you walk in and you're going back to like a family reunion type thing, that it's so comfortable, it's beautiful, people are so happy to see you. So I would just say I encourage people to tap into that a bit more, and might sound hypocritical because before I was like, take a step back from your network. Mm-hmm. But in that sense, I think the way the women present themselves and the connections that we have is very opening and welcoming. And when I say like tap into the women around you, I'm not saying just the females that are there. I'm talking about everyone in the way that we might embody our own feminine energy and things like that. So kind of just an invitation to tap into what's around you, take a risk a bit more, and experience the beauty of who we are and what the industry might be able to create as a new legacy.
Absolutely. Well, thank you ladies so much for joining us for this. Big thanks obviously to the Cannabis Certification Council and the Cannabis Sustainability Symposium for having us all here today. What a wonderful event, and just truly enjoyed this conversation with you ladies. I absolutely would like to follow up with both of you. You're both doing such incredible things, and along those same lines of like building community and knowing each other, and doing this whole thing, being this giant collective pivotal voice as we push forward, whether it's with sustainability standards or policy reform or social equity or medicine, whatever it is. I mean, it absolutely is going to take all of us to get there. So thank you ladies so much for your time. Thanks to the platform for hosting. For attendees that are watching, I do want to let you all know that there will be a few more minutes remaining in the other room waste, along with closing remarks there. So thank you ladies so much. Thank you to the attendees who joined us, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.